Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our monthly meeting of the Cobb County Board of Zoning Appeals. As is our custom at this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Dave Braden to come forward. He is here representing all our employees of Cobb County. And as is our custom at this time, I'd ask you all to please rise, and Mr. Braden will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. For those of you that are in the building today and those many watchers that are watching us on TV, let me give you a little insight on how we're going to conduct the meeting. As we go forward, the first agenda before us will be the consent agenda. These are applications that not only this board has reviewed, but our professional and engineering staff have reviewed. To our knowledge, there is no known opposition to any of these particular cases. So as we go forward, this will be the process. Mr. John Peterson, head zoning administrator, will read these cases into the record, and as he does, those of you that are present, as he reads your name, raise your hand to identify yourself. Likewise, as he reads these into the record, if there's anybody here that is in opposition to any of these particular cases, they will also have an opportunity to identify themselves. And if we do have opposition to these particular cases, we will hear it in its regular numeric order. As we go forward and we get into our regular agenda, our officer today is Margie. Margie, would you please raise your hand? Ladies and gentlemen, the way we will continue as we read these cases into the record, again, the applicant will have an opportunity to raise their hand, and again, the opposition folks will identify themselves by raising their hand. At that time, the applicant, he or she will have a 10-minute period to make their presentation known to the board. So what happens at that time, anybody that's going to give testimony will come forward. Miss Margie is our officer today. She will swear you in. Those of you that are going to give testimony will give testimony to the podium to my right. The applicant at that time will have a 10-minute period to make his position known to this board. And likewise and collectively, those in opposition will also have a 10-minute period to make their opposition known to this board. So just be cognizant of the fact that you only have a 10-minute period. If you have more than one speaker, make sure you leave enough time for your other persons to speak. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Peterson for any special announcements. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. There is one announcement I need to make before we start the hearing. For the people here in attendance in person, if you have a cell phone, please turn the volume off on your cell phone. When they ring, they do interfere with the broadcast and the presentations. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to start the consent agenda.
Well, let's jump right in.
Thank you. Cobb County Board of Zoning Appeals, variance hearing consent agenda for June 10, 2020. Variance case V62, Joanne Fabrics, request a variance to increase the size of the wall sign from 49 square feet to 241 square feet for a wall sign on the west side of the building, which is sign A, and to 88 square feet for a wall sign on the north side of the building, which is sign B, in land lots 645 and 652 of the 16th district. The property is located on the east side of Roberts Court, south of Ernest Barrett Parkway. Staff recommends approval. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V62? Let the record show there's no one opposed to variance case V62. Variance case V78, Amanda Black requests a variance to reduce the rear setback from required 50 feet to 45 feet in land lot 909 of the 16th district. The property is located at the southern terminus of Langdale Court, south of Princeton Corners Lane. Staff recommends approval. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V78? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case V79, Starbucks requests a variance to exceed the maximum wall sign area for each occupant or tenant from 49 square feet to 120.2 square feet in land lots 748 and 749 of the 17th district. The property is located on the southeast corner of Atlanta Road in West Village Place, northwest of Interstate 285. Staff recommends approval, subject to stormwater management comments. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case of V79? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case of V80, Planners and Engineers Collaborative Incorporated, request a variance to increase the maximum allowable impervious surface from 35% to 45% in land lot 843 of the 17th district. The property is located on the west side of Interstate 285, on the south side of Mount Wilkinson Parkway, and on the east side of Spring Hill Parkway. Staff recommends approval, subject to stormwater management comments. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case of V80? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case of V81, William B. Wagner and Kimberly J. Wagner request a variance to allow an accessory structure and approximately 1,024 square foot detached garage to be located to the front of the principal building. And number two, allow parking and or maneuvering of vehicles on unhardened and treated surface, which is a proposed expansion of an existing gravel driveway in land lot 48 of the first district. The property is located on the east side of Rock Ivy Trail, east of Hunt Ridge Drive. Staff recommends approval. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V81? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case V82, Matthew Brown and Sophia 2 Brown request a variance to reduce the rear setback from required 20 feet to 6 feet in land lot 770 of the 17th district. The property is located at the northwest intersection of Simpson Road and Spring Hill Road, north of Paces Ferry Road. Staff recommends approval, subject to number one, sewer comments, and number two, the applicant must plant a minimum of 5 emerald arborvitae trees between a new addition and the back fence in a minimum of 2-gallon containers, or some other planting proposal that is subject to approval by the county arborist within 60 days of the completion of the new addition. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case of V82? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case of V83, Gregory P. Nyahe requests a variance to reduce the rear setback for an accessory structure under 650 square feet for an approximately 615 square foot above ground pool from required 35 feet to 12 feet in land lot 156 of the 16th district. The property is located on the south side of Dover Street, west of Canton Road. Staff recommends approval. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V83? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Variance case V84, Satyan Patel requests a variance to allow a second electrical meter on a residential property in land lot 688 of the 16th district. The property is located on the west side of Johnson Ferry Road, north of Savannah Ridge Drive. Staff recommends approval, subject to the following conditions. Number one, sewer comments, and number two, property may only be used for a single-family dwelling unit. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V84? Let the record show there's no one opposed. And that completes the written consent agenda, Mr. Chairman and Board. I believe there are 2 other cases we could add to consent agenda,
Okay,
and I'll read those in right now, Mr. Chairman and Board.
okay, let's do it.
Okay. Variance case V72, Teresa L. Woodward requests a variance to reduce the setback for an accessory structure, an existing 400 square foot detached garage from 10 feet to 3 feet adjacent to the south property line, located on the east side of Twin Oaks Drive, north of Hathaway Road, in land lot 234 of the 20th district. Staff recommends approval, subject to the site plan containing the variance analysis that shows the location of the accessory structure. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V72? Let the record show there's no one opposed. And the next one is variance case V75, Kimberly Horn requests a variance to increase the allowable amount of wall signage from 49 square feet to 195.7 square feet. The property is located on the south side of Dallas Highway and on the west side of Barrett Parkway in land lot 27 of the 19th district. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V75? Let the record show there's no one here to oppose that. And that completes the consent agenda, Mr. Chairman. So we're going to have 2 votes on this. We need the first vote to add case V72 and V75 to consent as read in. And I don't know if Mr. Beloin wants to make a comment on either one of
All
those
right,
cases.
it's back to this board for discussion. Fred Beloin represents both cases V72 and 75, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Beloin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm wearing this mask not because I need to. I'm social distancing from everybody, but the chairman asked me to keep it on, so I'll just stick with it. V72, my understanding is that last month someone showed up and objected, but it's staff's understanding there's no longer an objection.
Yeah, there was a property line issue and that's been resolved.
Thank you. So With that, I'll be making that motion in just a moment. Well, make a separate motion. I'll go ahead and make the motion now to add B72 to the consent agenda, and that be approved by consent as recommended by staff.
All right, do you want to add 75 to that at the same time?
I'll do it now, yes.
Both of them.
75, if I could have our television specialist put something in the record, just
Okay.
very briefly. And let me just go ahead and state for the record, this is a photograph of the existing target with the existing sign on the target. I have Mr. Flip back to 75.
White, I think.
Charles White here from Kimley Horn, and he has confirmed to me that what has happened here is we have a logo change by Target, and the new sign is within a matter of just a very few square feet in size of the existing sign. So with that explanation, that we're really not making a significant change to the size relative to the existing sign, but we're just accommodating a logo change, my request is that we also add V75 to the consent agenda.
All right, I've got a motion to add V72 and V75. Do I have a second to that motion? Ms. Williams, seconds. Any other comment from board members? Any comment about any of the other consent agenda items that we have? Okay, not hearing any.
I'll just add,
Mr. Galt?
when we vote, I'll vote in favor of all the items except for V82, which I'll
Yeah,
vote opposed
And
to.
this first vote is just to add the two cases to
Right.
consent,
Yeah,
and then the
so-
second
Yeah.
vote will be to approve the consent agenda.
All right, let's do the first vote first. I've got a motion, I've got a second. First vote, call for the question. Okay, that's
All in
approved
favor?
5-0. All right, now I need a motion on the second.
That would be a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Yep.
No, just at V82.
Judy, go ahead, I'm waiting on your motion.
Make a motion. I forgot how you do it. Can y'all hear me?
We're,
Can you hear me?
Slide it all the way to the center.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay. Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
got a motion, have a second.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. Goldporter. No other comments, call for the motion. All in favor signify again. We've got a 5-0 vote
With one, I'm voting opposed to V82.
and one opposed with a 4-1 vote on V82.
Yes.
Okay, that concludes our consent agenda for today. Ladies and gentlemen, again, because of the virus situation, our staff has worked tirelessly to take care of the consent agenda. We have a multitude of people that are sitting in their cars and they're not being imposed upon to be brought into the building. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break, how we can email the people that are sitting in their cars, either to let them know that their business is complete with us today and they can go, or if they're coming in for their regular agenda. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to allow you to leave. I'm going to ask you to take care of yourselves and take care of your neighbor, and we'll see you next month. Thank you. Let's go to the break. I don't hear and gentlemen, we're back for the continuation of our June the 10th Cobb County Board of Zoning Appeals hearing at Cobb County. And with that said, John, where did we leave off?
Yes, sir. Variance case V49, Zachary J. Wright requests a variance to number one, reduce the setback for an accessory structure over 650 square feet for an approximately 2,800 square foot garage, required 100 feet to 9 feet adjacent to the southern property line and the western property line. And number two, allow parking and/or maneuvering of vehicles on a non-hardened and treated surface in land lot 177 of the 20th District. The property is located on the west side of Kennesaw Duos Road, north of Bluff Drive. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V49? Please raise your hands.
Just keep your hand up, how we get a head
Six.
count.
Let the record show the 6 people here opposed. Would the applicant in opposition please come forward and be sworn in?
Anybody that's going to give testimony, any of you folks that want to say something, come forward and we'll get you sworn in. If you don't get sworn in, you can't talk. All right, come forward to this young lady and you all raise your hand and she'll tell you what to do. Go. Okay, sir, for the purpose of the record, if you would, please give us your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adam Rosen with Rosen & Rosen here on behalf of Zachary Wright in V49, this variance request on Kennesaw Due West Road. This case was before you originally last month, and we thank the board for the opportunity to allow some time to continue the case. Until today, we identified and were had some items brought to our attention that we needed to address and correct, and that gave us some additional time to work on the application into what it is today. So thank you for that. But we are here for the second time, and I'm here for the second time without a mask on, as I was chastised for the first time, but it looks like that's been loosened up a little bit. So thank you.
Well, let me just point out to the audience, there's thousands of people watching this, that we are spaced pretty well apart. So
That's
we
right.
are observing all the rules and regulations.
I agree. That was my next point. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir. Thank you.
Related to this application, this property is 2205 Kennesaw Due West Road. It's on the west side of Kennesaw Due West, and you can see it outlined in red there for you, that blue or lighter shading of the properties. Those are all properties that are within the corporate limits of the city of Kennesaw. Just past our property and closer to the industrial properties that you see southern of us is US 41, and then south of us toward the Big Shanty property and back into the city of Kennesaw. So it's a checkerboard of Cobb and Kennesaw in this area, with our property, of course, being in Cobb County. This one shows you a little bit closer aerial of the property itself. And this is important for this slide, but for this case overall, is Mr. Wright's property itself. The size of it and what is existing on the property and what's proposed on the property. You can see that dot that identifies our property is also right about where his home sits. Behind that is an existing garage. Just next door to that existing garage is an enclosed car trailer. And that's about where the proposed garage structure is proposed to be built on this property. That's important for two reasons. One is the entire rest of the property, and you'll see a little bit more clearly in some later photos, is heavily wooded on the remaining north side of our property as well as the back of it. And that also will show you in the topography of the property slopes downward towards the north of the site. And that's why all the buildings are existing and proposed to be in the location that they're in. And that's the reason for the setback variance that we've requested. As I mentioned, we did make a number of changes since just before and since this case was on to be heard a month ago. The things that were identified that we corrected on the site plan or clarified on the site plan are both. One of those is the building size. We have maintained the same building size on the site plan. We realized that there was a difference in the actual scale on the site plan in different versions of the plan as they were submitted at different times to the county. That resulted in staff, I believe, calculating correctly per the scale, but not correctly for the size building we're proposing at a lower number. That was identified before the last hearing, which we corrected and resubmitted for the record shortly after the case was continued. We also identified on that revised site plan the impervious surface percentages. Those were not necessarily concerns that were raised, but concerns that we always look at for these types of cases. And we identified those in comparison to the two different acreage sizes that were brought up. Our plan showed 1.7 acres. I think the tax assessor and some other data showed 1.2. So we showed you the impervious surface calculation based on either acreage, just to show you that no matter what, we're below the 35% maximum impervious surface requirement. And then we did clarify again that it is proposed that all parking will be on a hardened surface. That was not clear from the first plan, so staff identified that as a variance. That has not been a variance that we've requested. We just didn't show you at first that that's what we would intended to do. So we clarified that by showing you a driveway on this plan as well. A couple other things. You can see from the aerial we saw before, now looking at the plan itself, you can see where those buildings do sit in orientation to the property in total. What I've also done is outlined for you either existing fencing or proposed fencing that will be on this property when all of this is said and done. The western side or the rear of the proposed garage is an existing fence with a row of evergreen plantings that are already installed that I'll show you a picture of as well. And then to the north of that is an existing privacy fence that's wrapping around and enclosing the garage, not the property line, which is much further away north, but also enclosing that garage and connecting to the existing garage. The long blue line at the southern portion of our property is a fence that will be there as a part of a project with his neighbor to the south to build a privacy fence along that property line as well. So I wanted to make sure you understood exactly what's either there or going to be there as far as privacy fencing and landscaping is concerned. And I think that covers all of the different changes and aspects of the site plan itself. The topography that we mentioned, this is the Cobb County GIS topography map showing you just how much that property does slope, starting somewhere around where our Mr. Wright's home is and the existing garage, falling downhill as you get to the north of the property. And again, that's why the buildings are proposed to be in the location that they're in, they're building, and that's why the existing home and garage is where they are. For those of you that have driven by, you've seen some of this. Those of you that have been on the site, you've seen these second two pictures, but the first picture shows you the view from Kennesaw Due West Road, which is, as you can see, difficult to even see the home, let alone any building that is going to be built behind that home. We've identified pictures back towards Kennesaw Due West where you can either see the car across the street or barely see the home across the street. I want to make sure you've got a good idea of what it's actually like to be standing in the location of where this building is proposed to be. This is the privacy fence that's already built to the rear of the property with the landscaping. And then the other picture is showing you what's existing on the neighbor's side of the fence with his existing mature landscaping that's there, showing you the separation between the two. That's the rear of the proposed garage. I did not get on Mr. Wright's roof for this first picture, but this view I thought was important because it helps you have an understanding of what it looks like in the backyard, to see the sloping of the property, to show you why the building is proposed to be located where it is, to show you that although we've heard how massive the building is and these things about the building, that it actually fits perfectly in that section of the property. And although Mr. Wright unintentionally poured the foundation that's existing, ordered materials, then realized that he needed a variance, we have the benefit of seeing what that concrete pad looks like. And you can see from this aerial how that will fit in with the property appropriately. And you can see the trailer, the truck, the car, the boats, the things that are the boat and jet skis that are outside that will have the benefit of now being in an enclosed structure. A couple more views, one looking back towards the rear corner of our property and the other one showing you the inside of how The garage is already wrapped in a fence and landscaping. Another view of the back corner of the property showing you just how far you have to look or can't see any other residences through the backwoods from our rear corner of our property. And then a more recent picture that we've provided showing you the insulation that has already been purchased to be put inside the garage to make sure that there are no sound concerns for the building itself. Mr. Wright is an employee with Snap-on Tools. That truck does not stay on the property. He actually had to help with the delivery of these materials, but that's important because there's been a lot of discussion about him being a race car driver for a team or some sponsorships or and employed by a race car team. He's actually employed by Snap-on as a full-time job, 5 to 6 days a week. So I thought that was helpful for you to go ahead and see that and answer that question for you there. But important for the noise concerns, that's the insulation that's already there to be installed, and we stipulated to that as well. I went ahead and did some measurements for myself and for you to see that we're anywhere from 220 to 280 feet separated from a couple of our nearby residences that I believe that we've heard from. So I wanted you to have that idea of the distance of separation. I'm slowly losing time. These conditions are all a part of the stipulation letter that was submitted today. Some of those were a part of the previous stipulation letters. Some of those are things that we're doing anyway, but we wanted to make sure everyone understood are being done, like the insulation and things that maybe you wouldn't have known about. So that's all part of the stipulation letter. I'm losing time here, so I'll let you ask me questions about them.
We'll give you a little extra time because I think this is important to get these conditions on the record, so go right ahead.
Okay.
I'll add the extra time to the opposition's time.
We heard questions about the building height and the building being 2 stories. So we've stipulated that the building will not be a 2-story building. We've agreed that all work will be conducted inside the garage. That's what you see in a commercial automobile repair facility stipulation. If I want to work on my car in my garage at home, it's not impermissible, but for Mr. Wright, he's going to volunteer that. So all work is to be done inside the structure. The previously installed fencing and landscaping will remain and be maintained. And then the fencing that's proposed will remain and be maintained. Again, all parking on a hard surface, which we've already identified. No commercial use of the garage and no automotive repair facility. Automotive repair facility, of course, is a permitted use under your ordinance as far as its definitions. We wanted to go ahead and clarify that's not what this is. This is not a place for Mr. Wright to bring friends over to work on their vehicles or to do it for a business. And we also wanted to commit to you that it's not used for commercial purposes. The question of this hobby of his being a commercial operation, if it is, it's going to be stopped by a stipulation now, and he's volunteering that. We've also volunteered that he will not drive the race car we're talking about on Kennesaw Due West Road. It's not a street legal vehicle, and we've actually identified the complained of times for noise for driving on Kennesaw Due West as being times that Mr. Wright would not have even been able to be that person. So we may have other vehicles that we're hearing in the neighborhood, but we went ahead and clarified that by adding in this stipulation as well. We limited the time that the race car could be, I say quote with the race car, could be cranked outside of the garage, and that's from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Again, the insulation at a significant cost already to Mr. Wright, and we are not asking to waive or vary from what's already required in your ordinance for a building this size to have to go through plan review and match the architecture of the home. That's a component of this that's additional to any other smaller structure that this has to do is to go back through John and his staff to get approved, even if you approve the variances for today. So we answered the other questions about the acreage, the building size, the reason for the storage. I was part of, and a couple of you were on the planning commission when we worked on a boat storage project in Northwest Cobb. Ultimately, that was not successful. If we're not going to allow storage to be at facilities because we don't want it in certain areas, we've got to have some accommodation for what's close to Lake Allatoona, Lake County. And I think this is a good accommodation in this case. Mr. Wright is doing it the right way. He's spending a lot of money to make sure that he doesn't bother his neighbors. I also want to submit, for the record, I don't think I've already submitted a consent form from one of our contiguous property owners for the property across the street from us. With that, thank you for the extra time. Mr. Wright's here. I'm here if you have any questions.
Okay, we're going to add 2 minutes and 30 seconds to the opposition's time, Mr. Peterson. So at this time, we will hear from the opposition. Okay, and again, for the purpose of the record, let's start off by giving me your name, please, first.
My name's Abigail Brousseau.
Okay?
Joy Carlisle.
Boy, let's do, okay, give me the second name.
Joy Carlisle.
Okay, all right, we'll go with these two to start off.
Are we allowed to pass you guys information?
him.
If you give it to this gentleman over there, he'll take care of it. Thank you.
Yep, that starts. Okay. Can we start yet?
Yes, ma'am, I'm waiting on you. Go right ahead.
I'm sorry. Joy Carlisle, 2111 Kennesaw Due West Road. We do not have a lawyer with us at this point, but we are putting this board on notice that we are reserving and preserving our rights to constitutionally challenge and appeal the decision if the variance is granted. We will retain a lawyer to assist us at that point, and we'll challenge it. We've already given y'all the petition. It should be in the record. I dropped it off here on May 13th.
Hold up the petition, how we all know what you're talking about. You've already submitted the petition.
Yes, and this is extra right here. So I'm not going to go over what we've already given you.
So have we already received this, or is this the first time you're giving it to us?
I was here May 13th, and I turned in all pictures and
Okay.
petition and everything. And inside that,
Okay.
it says that Mr. Wright has already been aware of complaints filed by the police department by neighbors due to excessive noise. He has no muffler on his race car. A standard garage is 24 by 24, 24 by 30, compared to his 40 by 70 by 20 tall garage. If you want to compare about this size right here, that's about the size of garage he's making. Looking at his toys, the largest he would need is 36 by 24 by 10. The application, are you running those through? Just keep running them, I'm sorry. The application submitted by Mr. Wright included misleading and false information, and his attorney sent a letter stating it is not to be used by any race team or others. Zach Wright's Blue Turd is a race team. He travels all over the United States racing. Maryland, Denver, Indianapolis, North Carolina, all those are on his Facebook page. The variance request plat is not to scale, making the new garage look smaller than the house when it's 2 foot longer and several feet wider. The attorneys later stated that the plan has always been shown accurate to the building and the size of the plat. And if anyone wants to see the ruler, I've got one so you can compare what he has on his. The attorney said in his letter to me that the site plan was mailed to all contiguous neighbors, that only 2 received them. The data site, and also the person that he received his signature from is deaf. He told me, he said, I can't hear anything. The site states 1.7 acres when on the warranty deed, which is when you purchase your property, states 1.2 acres. The lot is 150 by 300 by 200 by 300. And if you look at your back 2 pages that we gave you on the paperclip, it shows you that. Inside that warranty deed, it says the conveyance is made subject. This conveyance is made subject to all zoning ordinances, easements, and restrictions to record affecting said bargain premises. And I guess he's still keeping going through if y'all can see. Mr. Wright stated the slope of the lot required garage in its proposed location. He tore down a carport by his old garage, and that spot was flat. He used a bobcat to make the current location. Mr. Wright complained that the imposition of the ordinance in this case would require site development and potential unintentional negative consequences, yet he is giving all his neighbors negative consequences with his commercial grade building. It rises 15 feet over the back fence, and it will be over the roof line of the property back there. It'll be over his roof line. It's 20 foot tall. The runoff is already an issue. He is proposing running his water to the rear of this lot and then into the neighborhood retention pond. His property is at a higher elevation than most in the area, and this metal structure will stick out like an eyesore. During 6 months out of the year, it will be very visible, and there are no other structures like this around unless he goes up 41 and purchases or rents the garage at the corner. His planned structure is not complementary to the primary structure as required in your code 134, 197, 13B5. Mr. Wright said the property was limited by location and existing structures, mainly because he's building 164% of the size of his home footprint, 2,800 square foot garage compared to 1,708 square foot home. The primary structure in a residential district should be the principal house on the lot as required in your code 134, 197, 13B12. He states adjoining property owners are screened with existing natural landscape, a privacy fence and planted landscape. His fence is about 25% of the height, so 15 foot will be visible and right on the back of the neighbor behind him. The little trees he planted will take 25 years to reach the height needed, and they will be about 20 foot across and tear down the fence he planted against them. This is why we want the structure 100 feet from the property. This is not a little shed, it is a giant metal warehouse. Like I said, approximately this size. In his request for variance, he states a storage shed, yet all over Facebook page, he states it is his new shop, home of the Blue Turd, his drag race car. Mr. Zach Wright drag races for profit and has several sponsors. He sells his merchandise online and at his drag races. The giant garage will house his drag race car, dually truck, trailer, and possibly his Snap-on Tools truck, evident of the home occupation. Mechanical equipment, including nitro oxide fuel, are not customary. More than 25% will be used for his drag racing job. When he goes to races, extra cars are parked on his property. And if you'll look at your code, 134-197 2B 1 through 8. And his racing business, there's also a salary attached that he should be sending up there somewhere. We sent a request to Cobb County, and they stated he does not have a business license, but he is selling promotional products with his logo on his Facebook and other outlets. There it is, right there. The original variance request has several items with false information, including stating he was building a 1,293 square foot garage. They kept changing the plat and setbacks. When he found out we knew the truth, he changed his application and his petition was postponed. We believe it shows he's not an honest player, as demonstrated by his plans and the actual building. Also in the letter from the attorney, Adam Rosen, he stated, Mr. Wright doesn't drive his vehicle on the street. If Mr. Wright's personal Facebook was still up, you could watch videos of him driving on the street with his not street legal car. The statement from the stormwater management, the proposed structure location drains toward an existing residential house to the rear of this parcel. That's the business license stuff, okay. Due to its close proximity, the proposed garage shed should be at least within the lot setbacks, 35 feet rear, 10-foot side. If approved, any roof drains will be discharged to the ground at the structure to maximize overflow path to runoff. The runoff is already an issue. He is proposing running his water to the rear of his lot and then into the neighborhood retention pond. I don't believe it was recommended to the true size of the structure, but to the 1,293 square foot, because 35 foot is for a smaller structure. We do not agree with any structure this size. We do not agree with less than 100-foot setback. What will happen to the property when Mr. Wright sells and there's a giant structure larger than his home? All combined outdoor square footage would be 3,664 square foot compared to his home square footage of 1,708 square foot. More than double the size of his home is his storage properties. The noise Mr. Wright creates many times during the day and night is very disruptive. If you're asleep and he decides to work on his vehicle at 1 a.m., it will scare you so bad you will think a car is crashing into your home. The noise makes the dogs bark, and I would say about 90% of the people who signed the petition have a dog. One neighbor is a nurse, and she had to sleep during the day. She says he wakes her up with the noise. Once the dogs start, it's hard to calm them down. Then children and everyone in the home is disturbed. We request you please follow the official code of Cobb County, Georgia, Chapter 134, Zoning, Article 4, District Regulation 134, 197, R20, Single Family Resident District, to help us protect our property values, have peace of mind, plus keep our homes a safe and secure environment to live and raise our families. If this garage were to be built, it would impact our enjoyment and the right of having a peaceful home. We request you please reject V49, and thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joy.
Okay, next speaker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen.
Give us your name again.
Yes, sir. My name's Abigail Brousseau. I'm a contiguous neighbor. I share a fence line with Mr. Wright. I would like to quickly just show y'all a quick snapshot. trying to sleep, you're trying to do business, you're trying to enjoy your afternoon, your Saturday afternoon. This is what we commonly hear. So when we talk about the structure getting, can y'all even hear me? I think my point's made as far as that's concerned. I have 4 categories of concern: the sound, the commercial versus residential, fraudulent information on the application, and just the overall visual size of what the structure is going to look like. This first slide just shows every signature in our neighborhood in opposition to this variance. Like I said, I'm a contiguous neighbor. We hear the revving at all times. As far as it being commercial versus residential, any endeavor where you're making money is a commercial endeavor. He currently he has sponsors. He sells merchandise. How do I go through this? I think I just stopped it. Next slide. Okay. This is a write-up in a dragzine magazine. I have hobbies. I don't get written up in magazines. I don't get on Netflix. Next slide. He's on Fastest Car on Netflix. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the car. It's a beautiful car. He's done a lot with it. But as far as working on it in a commercial 2,800 square foot garage over our back fence line, there's buildings for sale on 41 for lease that you can work on those garages. You can work in those garages. Next slide. This is the engine. This is not a street car. This is not a hobby car. This is a professional race car. Keep going. This is his Facebook. His car, excuse the name, is called the Blue Turd. He promotes himself as a public figure. There's 11,000 people liking his page. That's 1/3 the size of the city of Kennesaw. So as far as, and it's also the world's quickest and fastest tourist. Keep going. He says on public posts that when it comes to racing, you have to build for the car in 2 years. So even, this is a continuous thing that we're going to have to fight. And especially as it continues to grow and expand, he's continuing to grow and expand his race car empire. Keep going. So this just shows that there's merchandise for sale on his Facebook, T-shirts, stickers, keep going. Talks about his Blue Turd headquarters coming soon. He took down his public page prior to this meeting. I think that's pretty telling. As far as the fraudulent information on the application, the revisions were made only when false information was pointed out. The building size was not the right size. The nature of the use was not the right nature of the use. The lot size is still incorrect. He's claiming he has 1.71 acres. He's got 1.2. That's what he's paying taxes on. At the very minimum, there should be a survey on this property. If there's a question about the size of the property and the surface area, where's the survey? Keep going. Also, it was originally called a storage shed. This was not a storage shed, and it was erroneously named that way. And then as far as the proposed concrete slab that his attorney put in the variance, in the revision variance, he referred to it as a proposed concrete slab. He's already started construction. The slab is poured, the materials are delivered. Keep going. Those are 2 of the doors. These are concrete, huge doors. That's not a shed. 14 by 14. 14 by 14 doors. Keep going. Those are steel beams, which that neighbor where the materials are located received a citation, a code violation for those materials that are stored for his neighbor. Keep going. This is a rendering that said publicly Blue Turd headquarters coming soon. Headquarters doesn't say work garage. Headquarters indicates that this is going to be where the business is operated from. Keep going. This is actually a 3-axle trailer that shows the visual to the back property line. Now, the storage shed, as Joy said, is going to be this size of this room, but it's going to be 2 stories tall. So any evergreen is not going to cover that back area. Keep going, sorry. So this is a view from the back neighbors. Now, there's 2 things that are at issue right here. Number 1, it said once the concrete slab was poured, they would address the drainage. The concrete slab is already poured. The drainage, we've had a lot of rain in the last day especially. The drainage comes down through this back property line, goes into these people's house. I think that the photos the attorney used are very interesting considering this is the back view. That top right-hand spot is going to be the view of this neighbor. Keep going. Just shows you the runoff underneath the fence line with a concrete slab on the other side of it. Next slide. It's just, as far as the visual and the building size, my husband also wrote a letter and he just said the decision made today will impact the attributes of our community, the trust of residents in Cobb County government processes, and the adherence of residents to Cobb County ordinances and code. The residents, regardless of contiguity of property, will be negatively impacted by the proposed structure and the activities conducted therein whether they're deemed commercial or not, though clearly it's commercial in nature. There are numerous other locations of the appropriate zoning designation, similar use, and similar aesthetic for the applicant to consider. And, we just don't have faith in the honesty and trustworthiness for them saying that it's not going to be commercial. Thank you, guys.
Almost out of time.
We have 45 signatures.
Yeah, we have 45 neighborhood signatures.
Anybody else sign up to speak, want to speak? You've got,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable.
wait a minute, stop right there. Just give me your name first.
I'm Andrew Shively. I'm a resident of
Andy,
Southborough Cove.
Andy, you got 30 seconds. Tell me in 30 seconds.
Very
Thank you.
quickly, my expertise is from Zepp Manufacturing Company. I was an employee there for 10 years. Chemicals that are used for race cars and other auto maintenance was something I wrote labels for and the instructions on the equipment. If Mr. Wright is allowed to build this facility in his backyard, we feel he will be bringing home all the maintenance required to keep those vehicles and other items that he is storing in that garage. And as a result, you will have a runoff issue that will involve the EPA like any commercial garage.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody else signed up? They got 10 seconds, 10 seconds. Come on, sir. I'm trying to be fair, give everybody opportunity to sign up.
My name is Brian Moody. I am the president of the HOA for our neighborhood. Basically, just wanted to be here to represent that the majority, almost all of our neighbors are opposed to this. And the noise pollution and the unusual upgrade to the property, we believe, is what's going to potentially hurt our property values. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And time has run out, ladies and gentlemen, so I declare the public session.
Mr. Chairman, the opposition went over by about 4.5 minutes, so we need to give the applicant 4.5 more minutes so the time's equal.
Okay, we will do that for
Does the applicant have anything else they want to add?
Mr. Rosa, do you have any comments you'd like to make it within a 4-minute period?
If I go over, then does it?
If you go over, I've got a big hook now, so I've kind of broken all the rules, but transparency is what we believe here in Cobb County. So we're giving you the opportunity. Now you got 3 minutes and 39 seconds. Go.
You've taken 20 seconds of my time. This is the certificate of mailing for the contiguous property mailings. So I just want to make sure that that has been submitted to the county as required to show that we did mail out. We always hear that mailings don't get there. We know that the mail cannot be reliable. This is what we're required to do to notify property owners, and we've done that. That was raised. The picture that was shown is not the building picture. That was a picture that Mr. Wright did post. But that's not the actual building that's going to be built. That was something that was posted long before he purchased the actual building and the size that it's going to be. The house size was misrepresented by a number of square feet. I think the noise that we heard was actually on the racetrack. That was something that Mr. Wright did post, but was not what's being listened to by those around us. I'm not aware of the police history. I'm not sure that Mr. Wright is of noise complaints. My understanding was that the first that we're hearing about these complaints were as recently as Friday of last week. So we've tried to react to all of that and propose what we've proposed to address any of those concerns. We believe that what's being done on the property now inside of a building like this is significantly a benefit for the area. And the neighbor has not received a citation, but has received a notice. He's been kind enough and supportive of Mr. Wright in this process to store those materials there. We've worked with code enforcement to address that concern. The faster we can get through the process, of course, that helps that issue. The runoff has been addressed as far as the stipulation for what will be done. As you know, that means that as soon as this goes through this process, if it does, Mr. Wright has to prove that he's doing the work that he promised that will be done. And if not, he doesn't get to build the building. So some differences in what's shown in the application and what's actually going to happen. That's why we have a stipulation letter that says, if we don't do this, we're in violation. We have code enforcement backing that, and we have the ability to be stopped to even build the building. And so that's why we put all of that forward and volunteered those conditions, so you know, and the community knows they have the protection against those issues. I can have Mr. Wright give you some of the specifics. He probably can say it better, but Mr. Wright is not paid to race. He doesn't operate a team of race cars. He doesn't sell a hat or T-shirt as a business venture. This is akin to someone that's going to any other type of tournament. There may be a winning for a tournament, but this is something that he volunteers to do. This is not his full-time profession. And again, like we've said, if this is something that's not allowed by the county ordinance because of being a business that's not allowed, we've added to what's already in the R20 ordinance that says he can't operate a commercial operation there. And if that's the case, then that's the remedy. And then that's something that Mr. Wright can no longer do. So we know we have the enforcement mechanisms that are there. We've added to that. That's getting very far away from, I think, what's important about the actual variance request itself and the location of the building, the reason for it with the topography, and the way that we're mitigating any negative impacts by installing over $5,000 worth of insulation. So I think that's what's important, the variance request, not these other issues that have been brought up. We've corrected the issues with the application that when they were brought to our attention, and that went back out to the public so it could be known. And so I think we've done what we can to address those concerns, but thank you.
With 1 second left. Very good job. Okay, I declare the public session over for case V49. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to turn this case over to Mr. Fred Beloit, who represents the district. And Fred, if you would, please lead us in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I will refer to the car as the Blue Turbo, whether that's an appropriate automobile term or not. I've decided that's my choice of terminology for it. I have a few questions for each of the folks involved. But first, let me start with the last gentleman who spoke in opposition from ZEP. Can you come back up?
Yes, sir.
So your concern is as to petrochemicals and other contaminants that would come from a garage? Is that?
Yes, sir, because the fact that that slab was poured with insufficient or no drainage whatsoever to route that to a city sewer, as you normally would do in a commercial operation, to avoid infrastructure being affected by someone else's runoff or inadvertent carelessness. We've had several fires in the neighborhood area. At least 2 of them in the last 30 years have involved vehicles that have done quite a bit of destruction to the home or the nearby structures. And so as you can tell, if he was to store petrochemicals such as a cleaning machine, which has 20 to 30 gallons of flammable material, or any kind of petrol for his racing, as you can tell, even recreational vehicles such as boats and jet skis take more than just a few gallons of fuel to do what they need to do. So there needs to be some caution.
Okay. So besides storage of petroleum, what else do we need to focus on?
At this point, with the elevation of his property and the runoff to the adjacent properties, for many years, we've had a natural spring that was on the property before the Oaks was developed. And as a result, we have a creek that runs down through my neighborhood on the other side of the property line that extends down through for probably the equivalent of 2 city streets. And it begins on that property right behind his.
Okay.
So any contamination would flow through the entire neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you raising those concerns.
Yes.
Let me go back to Ms. Brousseau or Ms. Brousseau. Okay. You said you're contiguous. Can you point out relative to this where you live?
Sure. If we're looking at the words right residence and garage, my property line is directly above it. It is. It's the one that's highlighted in the packet that I provided to you guys.
Okay. So do you have any thoughts on the view as you look towards this property? Have you presented any photos to us of what that view would be like?
It's really hard to accurately portray what the view is like in the wintertime when the leaves are down. Right now, there is definitely leaf coverage, and it probably does help with some of the sound. But during the winter, the sound carries, and we can see straight through to that property. Every single one of the contiguous property owners, except for the one across the street, which they brought to your attention, everybody signed that petition.
So.
We have 45 signatures against.
Right, I understand, but you're concerned about something looking like it's residential in nature, and your concern is drainage, and your concern is noise. Those are your three principal concerns, is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Have you given any consideration to the idea that if we further restricted the hours of operating a vehicle as a condition, that the neighbors might be better served, that might reduce the amount of noise?
If it were to be trusted, I just don't believe that, when the races are coming, they're going to be working on the car. And what we hear today with already on the property, we're going to hear more of that once it's been expanded. And the other thing is as far as, we consulted a realtor and, excessive noise and structures that are, not supposed to be there, those are deterrents for people buying property. So anybody that we were showing our house to, if there was race car noises coming from behind it, it could impact our property value.
Anyone else with any questions for this opponent?
Board members, anybody have any questions? Have you had an opportunity, Mr. Rosen presented the stipulations. Have you and your folks had an opportunity to look at those stipulations that were just presented today?
What date were they presented? I think the last correspondence I saw was from May 22nd.
June the 8th, June the 10th, I think were just submitted. Have you had an opportunity to look at those
I have
today?
not.
They're pretty, as he went over, they're pretty specific to the property, to the race car, to the time, to the runoff. And as far as the runoff is concerned, if I'm not mistaken, we haven't called Mr. Braden up, but he's our stormwater management expert, but I believe he has looked at that and has indicated the runoff is not an issue for this county.
Right.
So my question, again, I want to kind of focus on is what was presented today by Mr. Rosen. Have you folks had an opportunity to engage, to talk about that? It's pretty specific to everything that you have said.
I have not seen any of those correspondences.
All right, anybody else have any questions for this young lady? Thank you, ma'am. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr.
Have a nice
Chairman.
seat.
Okay,
Fred?
Let me go back to the applicant for just a moment. You've talked about insulation. Do you have any more specifics on that insulation at all?
Other than what it looks like, I think Mr. Wright probably can. Okay, come on. Introduce yourself.
My name is Zachary Wright.
Okay.
Just to give you a little bit of information on the insulation that has been purchased, I went out of my way to purchase some 8-inch thick sound deadening insulation that will go on all of the interior walls, as well as 6-inch thick that will go on the ceiling. And I did that not being coached into. This was done before I even had applied for a variance when I had purchased the building.
Okay, Fred, like, if I can, I jump in here a second. Just stick with the issue of the installation that we see up
Yes,
there.
yes, sir.
This is installation that you've already purchased, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Do you know if that installation is going to be enough to deaden the noise in the building? I mean, you say a 10-inch wall, a 6-inch wall, I don't have any idea. Is that going to be
I am
enough to
100% positive that with doors closed, with any activity going on within the garage, that it will be more than sufficient.
All right. With that said, are you also aware of what Mr. Rosen has presented today that simply stipulates that if you break that noise ordinance, that you're going to be shut down, complete, gone, you're going to lose everything?
Yes, sir.
Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fred, I'll go back to you unless somebody
Sure.
else has a question.
Yeah, let me just follow up on the noise issue. What are you going to do in terms of operating the vehicle in there? And you're going to have to do it with the doors wide open so that all the insulation in the world doesn't really help if the doors are open while you're working on the car, right? So can you talk about what can be done in that regard?
Yeah, any activity going on within the garage, a building of this size would allow me to operate and do what I would like to do with the doors closed. In my current garage right now, there's not much room for activity at all. It's actually quite packed up to where you have to work with the doors open.
Okay. So with the doors closed, how you going to vent out the emissions? How you going to handle that?
The car doesn't run inside, sir. That's why I put in I agreed with Mr. Adam that we would put in a stipulation that the car would not run outside of 9 to 8.
Okay, but during those hours, it would be your intent to run it with the doors open or run the engine with the doors open?
Really, typically my car doesn't run much outside as much as it is me putting it into the trailer. The only reason for my car running most of the time is for me to load it into my trailer to get prepared to go to, say, an event to where I want to race at. A building of this size would allow me to do that indoors. I have a winch inside my trailer, which allows me to load the vehicle without the car running. So all of this can be done indoors.
What about tuning up the vehicle before an event?
There's a shop in Powder Springs that I do that at. Our opposition actually provided a photo of that off of my Facebook. It is not at my home location.
Can you address at all the thought of contaminants that was raised by one of the opponents here?
My building will only have electric. There is no plumbing. There's no waste. Any water runoff is going to be done from the trench drains that we have stipulated that it will be put in. There's no plumbing inside the building at all. There's no waste. This is no more really as a storage building. It is to hold my trailer, my truck, my jet ski, my boat, to store everything inside. This isn't an operation. The building is not for just a car. It's to store my personal belongings in one area to where they're not seen by everybody else.
Would you still need a second garage if you got this, would you still need the second garage?
Yes, I do. It would be, I already made obligation to my wife that she can park in it.
And do you think that if we decided this was important, could you move the structure forward towards Kennesaw Due West Road instead of sitting it as far back as presently planned?
I could. The problem that arises is that it takes off the room between the back of my house. So when you have two vehicles in the driveway, there's not enough room to be able to turn a vehicle around. My driveway is a one in, one out. So you cannot, if you pull forward into the driveway, you have to have some room to be able to back your vehicle so you can drive out onto Kennesaw Due West Road. Moving the building forward, there would not be any room to do that.
You've agreed to restrict hours. How many total hours a week or total minutes per week on average do you think this car engine would be making noise?
My car runs probably 5 to 6 times a year. Most of the time it spends taken apart in my garage, not running.
Okay. And how many do you know how many decibels it can emit when you do run it?
I have a video that I recorded as early as yesterday that I would love to play.
Okay, please.
So here we have me talking, and you can see how loud. We've got about 80 decibels. Some people working next door. Otherwise, outside about 60 decibels, right? Here we have the car. I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Give me 1 second. I am inside the car, and we're only registering not under 90 decibels, which is as much as in an alarm clock if it was sitting right next to you. I'll get outside the car. Decibels. We'll walk to the road.
This might take a minute.
Car's still running. I'm not even at the end of my driveway. We're at 75 decibels. Here's traffic. My car's still running.
Okay. Okay, any other questions from anyone else on this panel?
Brian, Brian McDaniel.
I do. I don't know, I address it to Zachary or Adam. I was a little confused by the response about how much time would be working on the car when it's cranked each week. I understand you're only in certain number of races during the year, but on average, I mean, help me with a number they could expect it.
If I had to give an average, it'd be during the summer months, probably 4 weekends a year is the time that I'm actually working on the car and using the car at my own.
So very little during the week?
Nothing during the week. No, I work a full-time job 5 to 6 days a week. There's no time to work on it during the week, sir.
Okay, that's helpful. Is there any, and I'm sorry for my ignorance about cars and stuff like this, but, so these will be some stupid questions, but is there a way to muffle, like temporarily even, if you're working or if it's cranked?
No, sir, there's not really, besides for the building.
Yeah.
The car is not any louder than a lot of the vehicles that drive up and down Kennesaw Due West Road throughout the night or day. But the building would offer that muffle. Having a building to where if I did have to start it up or if I have to load it into the trailer, this gets rid of that noise.
Okay, thanks. I want to make sure I'm clear on one other response that you gave about storage of contaminants or oil and petroleum products.
So for storage of petroleum products or anything that I use as far as fluids, I dump my used motor oil at AutoZone. I carry it around in 5-gallon old drums, and I go dump it just like any other person would who changes their oil in their driveway. I don't store anything as far as large amounts of fluid. At best, I carry about 10 gallons of fuel, and that stays in the trailer for when I travel. The car only holds 2.5 gallons versus, my boat, which anybody can own, which is not uncommon, holds 30 gallons.
One of the pictures I'd noticed, there was a license plate on the car.
Yes, the car.
So if it's not street legal, does it still require?
Well, I've owned the car for over 10 years. Me and my dad bought that car together, and I'll try not to get too off topic. There was a Netflix series called Fastest Car, and in this, they talk about vehicles that ones who have modified and the backstories behind them, and they wanted video or for the Netflix series of the car driving up and down the road, and it being a car. And the car was registered, licensed, and insured for the better yet of 8.5 years. The car still has the tag on it, but I've not renewed it in about 1.5 years. I decided that there was no need to even have the car on the street anymore because I don't use it in that manner anymore.
Thanks. The last question is, just given the concerns that have been raised by so many of the neighbors at this point, why would you not consider trying to house this thing somewhere else? And given the limited number of times it sounds like you'd be working on it or whatever, I'm still wondering why. It seems to me it'd be a lot easier just to try and find a different place to.
A different place to live, or a place to put a building, or?
Well, to put the car and work on the car.
Well, it's still a personal belonging. If this was a way to generate income for me as being proposed, if it was a method of income, yes, I may, if I would look at putting it at another property, but this is my home. This is a hobby for me. This is something that I do a few weekends out of the year. I don't see a need to have to buy something for a hobby. It's more or less that the building offers more of a storage as for my trailer and my boat and the car, to put everything in one building as it is. The building is separate from racing. The building offers a solution for a lot of the current problems I have with storage of my belongings that I'm keeping outside. It's not for the car.
That's it for me.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Galt, do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you have mufflers on the car, or is it?
No, sir.
Okay, so it's straight
Yeah,
headers.
the car is turbocharged. The turbo does effectively act like a muffler. So in the video that I provided, it's not much louder, say at 100 feet away, than it is the normal road traffic.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Judy, do you have anything? Press your button.
Push my button right.
There you go.
Did it get it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
And the truth, I don't know anything about race cars either. Right now, I know more than I ever wanted to know. This is, it's not really a garage. I know we call it a garage, but it's really a warehouse that you're wanting to build. It looks like a warehouse, and it really is a warehouse. So did you ever consider just building a garage with, to put your boats in and your car to store it in, but not work on it? Did you ever consider that? And then taking it to that location you were talking about to work on it?
So the building, I think what you're getting confused with a little bit is it being a steel frame. It is a steel frame, and I chose that because there's less maintenance with a steel frame. At the end of the day, the garage is going to look exactly like my current residence. We've already had plans to do it's going to have a stone front, a stacked stone. It's 6 foot tall around the border and painted to match the house. Although it has a steel frame, like say a commercial automotive garage, it's mainly, the main reason I did that was because I don't have to worry about the building as far as maintenance with termites or roofing materials, and the building will look cleaner in the long run versus rotting wood. And
So you intend to make it look like your existing structure?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you think about reducing the size of it? That's an unusual large structure, even in the best of times, to over 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It is bigger than your house.
There's a discrepancy in the size of my home. My home is a little over 2,500 square feet. But again, if I was to have chosen a smaller building, then it doesn't alleviate any of the problems that I have, nor would any of the complaints that my neighbors have. The building is its length for a purpose, and that is so that I can, if I have to do any business with the car, whether it's unloading loading or anything, that stuff can be done inside with the trailer inside. If I was to make the building any smaller, it would be the same issue that we're having now, where I'm going to have to do my business in my driveway, where you're going to hear the car start up, you're going to hear me load it up. The size of the building alleviates any noise issues.
I think the size, I have two problems with it. The size and the location of it, because you've put all of the things that go on your neighbors. You've pushed it all back toward your neighbors. You know, I would have been more receptive, I think, if you had brought it up closer to your house or to the, you know, where you had the majority of it. But your neighbors are the ones that's actually got the blunt of it.
But nobody here lives at those properties that it affects, as far as how close it is. I had spoken with two of those neighbors who it affects the most. One has been holding my building materials for almost 4 months due to COVID-19 and us having to continue this for 30 days. And then the other neighbor, before we had even started this variance process, I had told him my plans and what I had wanted to do, and addressed his problem with the privacy fence and the greens and the trees and stuff like that to alleviate anything that he would have had to see.
So why, and one other question, I'll be through. Why did you order your building without permits or anything? Why did you go ahead and order it, pay for it?
It was a large mistake, and I learned. So I had hired a contractor to do this job from start to finish. Told me that he was going to handle everything, and I'm ignorant to the situation. I paid him to basically do everything, and then got as far as getting the building delivered, and the day after the building got delivered was when I had found out that he did not have the proper building permits. And at that time, I stopped everything, talked to my wife, and when I figured out the correct process, I stopped everything right then, and here we are on this journey.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
One other quick
Brian,
question.
yes,
I'm sorry, I
Mr.
forgot to ask this, but have you tried to engage with a lot of these neighbors who are opposed to this to have some dialogue about what things, I mean, I know y'all came back with some suggestions or things that you would be willing to do, but it seems like there would be value in having a direct kind of conversation rather than.
In all honesty, and with as much respect as possible, the neighbor that was brought up to my attention, I was a little in fear of doing it, because I have not ever met this neighbor in particular, and possibly my fault because I never made an introduction. But when the two contiguous neighbors that are closest to me came to my home to tell me about her and some of the things that she was saying and how she was out to get me, and quote unquote their words, I felt like if I was to approach her that I would do more harm than good.
Okay, let me kind of bring this thing back together. For those of you in the audience, our TV audience, the people that are here, this is a request that this board sees all the time. It's not an unusual request. There's many enthusiastic people that have antique cars and automobiles and boats and things like that requires a big building to put on there, to be put on their property. And either 1.2 or 1.7 is a pretty good sized piece of property. So these are things that this board has seen in the past, that we see quite honestly a lot. We're starting to see a lot of these buildings coming in. They want a second electrical pole, how they can put metered electricity into these buildings, because they have not only other cars, but they have electric cars. We're starting to see a lot of that. The stormwater management has weighed in. He has looked at the property. He does not see, at this point, the county does not see a problem with the stormwater runoff. So what we're faced with, Mr. Wright, is there's somewhere along the line, you have aggravated a lot of people with noise because they showed up in opposition to you today. So that's why I'm a little surprised that Mr. Rosen and you have come back in, you You brought this letter in, you're telling me that you're not going to start these cars, you're not going to make a lot of noise, you're going to go overboard, put insulation in there. And it sounds to me like that you are trying to accommodate your neighbors. As my colleague has pointed out, you haven't had dialogue with your neighbors. Your neighbors have pointed to us, told us they haven't had a chance to look at what you just brought in. And quite frankly, I think that you might be a little crazy, Mr. Wright, because you screw up one time, you're going to lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
You are going to lose a lot of money. So I advise you to think about that. But overall, we see these things on a day in and day out basis. With no other comments, Fred, we're going to go back to you for your wisdom.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Boyd, if I can respond to Mr. McDaniel's question real quick.
I'll leave that up to Fred. It's up to
Go
you,
ahead,
Fred.
go ahead, Mr.
Just
President.
on the correspondence, there was, I'll call it two different phases of interaction with folks around us, or three maybe, before this process started, what Mr. Wright has already talked about as far as talking to the two neighbors that are in the corner where the building will go. And it looks like they have apparently signed the petition, but in a phone call with me and Mr. Wright told him that with the fence and the landscaping, they were okay. I don't know what changed. The other neighbor has not signed the petition from our understanding and still talks to Mr. Wright and holds his materials. The two phases of correspondence with the folks that are here today was shortly before the last hearing, identifying the discrepancies that we then resubmitted to correct. That was also communicated back to that individual that's here today that brought those up, and sending and sharing the revised site plan and that stipulation letter and saying, questions or concerns, reach out to us. And then the second wave of that was, I think, as recent as Friday. And up until that point, we had not seen any activity from last hearing until today. And then Friday, hearing and seeing emails of questions and concerns that we then this morning responded to, and I copied both of those parties on that letter this morning. So obviously not a lot of time, and this morning till today is not a ton of time either. That's just why I wanted to outline those conditions to you, but I think that's more of the overall. Sorry,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you folks can have a seat. And here's what I'm going to recommend, and my own group here may shoot me down on this, and I won't even be upset if they do, but we've had a couple occasions before we were able to work through conflicts between neighbors and work out something that was mutually acceptable to everyone. So what I'm going to ask, I'm going to make a motion here that we continue this matter, or hold the decision on this matter till the next month's calendar. We wouldn't need to hear the case again. We would just need basically a short report from each side as to whether or not we succeeded in this concept. And the concept would be this, that Mr. Rosen would take one more shot at putting together a stipulation letter with all the conditions and all the restrictions that were talked about today. And then I would ask that be delivered both to me and to Ms. Brousseau, and that she coordinate with the opponents. And I would ask the opponents then to consider, and I would ask, when that letter is prepared, please be very careful to be specific as to the architectural detail. I heard today about stacked stone. Whatever the exterior is going to look like, let's please present that clearly. Let's present the information about the insulation clearly. Let's be sure that the hours of restriction, the no commercial use, the things outlined in the email to me of Tuesday, June 9th are in there. And then let's see what the neighborhood response is when that's all pulled together. And let me say to the neighbors, my understanding, we talked about this at our work session this past Monday in talking to council, is that as it stands right now, the noise ordinance does not apply till 11 p.m. at present. So somebody can work in their garage. Do we need to amend that?
Yeah, as I read back through the noise ordinance,
Okay.
there's certain things that don't apply till 11, but it would appear from my reading of it, and you may want to read through it during this time, that there are other things that apply 24/7.
Okay.
And one of them that appears to me to apply 24/7 is the discharge into open air of exhaust of any steam engine, internal combustion engine, or motorboat except through a muffler or other device which effectively prevents loud or explosive noises therefrom. So that one, so there are certain other things, that there's another part that goes into motorcycles, go-karts, and other motor vehicles, which this may apply as well, that looks like a 24/7, part of that, into continuous riding, and continuous may give them the out to it because it doesn't sound like it's continuous, the noise caused by that. So I think we might want to review the noise ordinance a little bit more as well.
Yeah, and we've also been presented with some information today. And I know some of this we saw on the screen today during the presentations, but I do want to make sure all this is reviewed before we render a decision. So that would be my motion today, that we hold this for a decision on next month's calendar, and that we work in that manner to see if we can achieve some common ground. It may not be possible, but folks have come this far and put in this much effort. I thought we ought to make that effort.
Got a motion, I've got a second. Discussion stage, comments. Just by way of a comment, I think that's a good proposal. These folks haven't had an opportunity to look at the submittal from Mr. Rosen. Quite frankly, I think that Mr. Wright has put himself in a position that I certainly wouldn't want to be in, because he's putting an awful lot on the line. Again, this proposal is not unusual. We see these things all the time. So I've got a motion, I've got a second. There is no rebuttal. I can't call anybody up, so we finished the public hearing is over with. I would, just by way of a comment, say, as everybody leaves, if you go out in the vestibule, I'd recommend that you exchange cards or telephone numbers, how we can communicate back and forth, have the dialogue, have the meetings, come back next month, give a report to Mr. Fred, and then we'll go from there. Got a motion, I've got a second. No other comments, call for the vote. All in favor of continuing this case for 30 days till our next scheduled meeting? Madam Secretary, that's approval, 5-0. Thank you, folks. Go ahead out in the vestibule. John, please tell me where I am.
Yes, sir.
63, somewhere.
Variance case V63, Cesar Castaneda Meza requests a variance to one, reduced rear setback from 35 feet to 21.5 feet for the primary structure. Number two, reduce the setback for an accessory structure, which is an existing 660 square foot frame shed and storage building, from 100 feet off any property line to 4 feet from the western property line and to 18 feet from the south property line. And number three, reduce the setback for an accessory structure, an existing outdoor kitchen, from 5 feet to 0 feet on the south property line in land lot 952 of the 19th district. The property is located at the southern terminus of Brianna Drive, south of Brianna Court. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V63? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Would the applicant please come forward to be sworn in?
All right, sir, if you would, please give me your name, please, first.
Hey, I'm Cesar Castaneda.
Caesar, tell us what you want. You've got time.
Basically, I'm just wanting to extend the kitchen outward by 18 feet. Right now, we have the kitchen on the left wall, stove, sink, all that good stuff.
It's all an outside kitchen.
It's not going to be outdoor. It's going to be under a roof as well. It's going to be a lot more convenient for everybody in the house. Right now, like I just said, we have the kitchen, then we have the dining table and the living room. It's all cluttered. There's really no more room to store any pots and pans. We had to build a pantry to keep in, cereal for the kids, all that good stuff. extending outward the kitchen, it would bring us a lot more space where the existing kitchen is at right now. We would have basically 5 feet clearing on both sides, for the dining room table. We could put up little tables, for, any of the little things. Extending it outward, it would also, it would reduce the heat that, sometimes fell in the living room. All those, all that steam, we make a lot of salsa. So, we gotta
Make a lot of salsa.
a lot of salsa, man.
I-
A lot of salsa. So,
I'll be
sometimes
over there
we're-
at 5:30.
Yeah. Sometimes we're in the living room, just inhaling all those spices and stuff, coughing.
Judy and I'd like chips to go along with it too.
Oh man, you gotta try the salsa on me.
Okay. Yeah, you got an outside kitchen too.
It's not really an outside kitchen. It's a barbecue area.
Okay, tell us about that.
That was built, I believe, around 3 to 4 years ago. It's on stamped concrete. We have a wall that kind of runs around just the front side of it. It has one grill. It has an electric stove on it, and it has a little sink. But that sink, it doesn't have any water running to it. What we do is we just connect our hose to it, and that's where we get our water from.
All right, anything else you want to tell us?
I mean, what's it?
Okay, is there anybody here in opposition to case V63? Hearing and not seeing anybody, it is back to this board for discussion. Mr. Gold Porter represents the district. Gold, if you would lead us to discussion.
Certainly, thank you, Murray. When we talked about a month ago, and I apologize that there was some confusion last month. You were out in the parking lot, we didn't know you were here, and we ended up continuing it, so you ended up having to come back again.
Yes, sir.
We talked about the fact that your outdoor kitchen, what we're referring to, your barbecue, by county standards, they refer to it as an outdoor kitchen, is located in large part on Wellstar's property. And we talked about you getting a hold of Wellstar to see if you could get permission to keep it there or not and get their position. Were you able to contact Wellstar?
I was not. I did attempt to contact them. Honestly, man, I only tried to contact them twice. I called. I don't remember the exact dates, but I called. There was no answer. I don't know who to send that email out to. I was planning on going up there to, possibly talk with somebody, but I mean, just the way, I'm scheduled with my job and all, it really didn't have much time to do so.
Okay, and I think when we had talked at that time, you made a comment that, getting the addition to your house is your primary concern, that variance for that. And then you also have the shed, which is, needs a variance as well.
Okay.
But you had said the barbecue you could move if you have to.
Yes.
So is that still your position?
Yes, it's still my position.
Okay. Okay, because that was the primary concern that I think we had, is that it's on somebody else's property, and without their permission, it's hard to give you a variance to let it stay with no, partially right up against theirs and actually on their property.
Right.
I think that's all the questions I have. Does anybody else have any?
No, we're ready for motion.
Okay. Okay, you can have a seat then.
Thank you.
And, I'll just comment that my issue remains, as I just said, the barbecue's still on the neighboring property without their permission. So I'm going to make a motion that we recommend approval for the variance of the primary structure and for the variance of the shed, which are the first two variances, and that we allow, I see he's got the wall. I think if we gave him a variance to reduce the setback for the accessory structure for the outdoor kitchen from 5 feet to 3 feet, he may be able to keep, part of his wall, but then use that as the back instead of the front. So that would be variance 3 to go from 5 feet to 3 feet on the south property line, and with direction that you move the barbecue off of the neighbor's property and off of that 2 feet off the property, or 3 feet off the property line.
Okay,
That's motion.
motion, do I have a second? Ms. Williams, second. No other comments, call for the vote. Signify by raising your hands. Okay, Madam Secretary, we're going to approve that with a 5-0 vote. And John, I think I'm complete, am I?
Now we got one more case.
Where am I?
Variance case V77, Alexander Properties.
Oh, yeah.
Request a variance to exceed the maximum total sign area allowed on a property from 64 square feet to 102 square feet in land lot 592 of the 18th district. The property is located on the north side of Riverside Parkway, west of City View Drive and Interstate 20. The applicant is present. Is there anyone here opposed to variance case V77? Let the record show there's no one opposed. Would the applicant please come forward to be sworn in?
Okay, sir, if you would, go ahead and give us your name.
Branson Davis.
Okay, tell us what you need, Mr. Davis.
We're just requesting a variance to put an additional sign on this property. I work for Fast Signs. I'm a project manager for them, so I'll be coordinating the installation and the production of the sign. The current property in question is a apartment complex owned by Alexander Properties. They do have one sign on the property, but as you approach the property from I-20 on Riverside Parkway, by the time you see the sign, you're almost passing the property, so we want to make it more easily identifiable by future tenants and people looking to rent property and also just to find the property in general.
So your hardship is the sign can't be seen, or just kind of go into a little more detail?
Just to give the, it's a large property. At the corner of Riverside Parkway and City View Drive is really where the property starts to be seen as you're approaching it. So really just looking for a second identifying sign for people approaching the property. The one sign that's been on the property for some time now takes up their allotted square footage, so we're just applying for a variance to have a second sign, of equal size placed closer to the area that you first see when you're approaching the property. And for what it's worth, I don't believe we'll be requiring a setback variance. I know that's called out in the original application, but I think there's now going to be a fence that's going to be relocated that will allow us to comply with that 62-foot from the center line setback. So that's kind of a null and void. We were really just looking for permission to put that second sign.
All right, anything else, sir?
No, sir.
Okay, is there anybody here in opposition to case V77? Hearing and not seeing anybody, it's back to this board for discussion. Mr. Galt Porter represents that, so Galt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Murray. I have a question for you, John. Is it, they need the variance to put up a second sign, or is the second sign going to be larger than is allowed?
The variance is for total sign area. They're allowed to have two signs on this property as long as they're spaced a certain distance apart. So
Okay.
the number of signs is not a problem. It's the square footage of both the signs combined.
Both the signs combined. Okay, I misunderstood that before because I thought they were trying to get a much bigger sign for the second sign. I will say, and I'm going to ask Cornelius to put this up on the screen, if you can put that up for me. We'll say I think the biggest problem, if people aren't seeing it, is the fact that there's some landscaping that the complex has put out on the county right-of-way. And everybody here will tell you I'm a big fan of landscaping. I require it on zonings all the time and that. So I have nothing against landscaping. But that one bush that I circled in red is a culprit of having a hard time seeing. And this, well, I'll call an intersection. It's technically not an intersection, but directly across the street is QT. And it's one of the few places along there that there's a break in the median that you can turn left and right. And there's been a lot of accidents at this particular intersection. And a lot of close calls too, because I drive through it all the time. So I think Alexander Properties may be smart to remove that one bush, not all the bushes, but that one, because I think it's probably causing a sightline issue for people leaving their property,
Sure.
as well as for people seeing their sign. Now I could see the sign from essentially where the old Waffle House was, which is at the property in
Yes,
a
sir.
Tahoe. Now in my car, it's a little bit harder. But with that bush gone, they could probably see the existing sign. But I certainly wouldn't have a problem with a second sign. So the second sign's not going to be the whole, what was it they're asking for? Not going to be 102 square feet. How big is the second sign?
So the overall structure is 8 by 10 feet, but the actual sign panel on it is roughly 3 by 7 feet. So it's actually, structure-wise, about the same as the current sign. The actual sign panel will actually be slightly smaller.
Okay. Okay, and the existing sign remains as well?
Correct, yes, sir.
So all put together, it's 102 feet then, correct, John?
Correct.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. Anybody else have any questions?
No, sir.
I do have a quick one. I'm looking at the drawing that shows where the proposed sign would go, and it's got this metal fence, and I think you mentioned something about it. Is that metal fence going away, or how the sign looks like it's behind this
So
fence?
is that, what picture are you looking at? Are you able to show me?
Probably
Might be
the
able to
site
shed some light on
plan.
it.
It's the site
Okay, so
plan.
that's the issue. So there is a metal fence that has, brick columns on it. It comes to a right angle point. What Alexander Properties wants to do is take out that right angle point and make that fence kind of a 45-degree angle fence.
All right.
And put the sign, basically, if you were to put the sign in there now, it would be inside that
That's what I
fence,
was
if that
thinking.
makes sense.
Okay, got it. That answers my question.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good enough. I think you can have a seat then if everybody's
Go
done.
right ahead.
And I'll make a motion that we approve V77 for the one variance for the sign from 64 feet to 102 feet.
Motion second by Brian McDaniel, and no other questions. Call for the vote. Signify by raising your hands. Madam Secretary, that is a 5-0 vote. John, my friend, where are we?
We're complete, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before we go, I've got the adoption of some minutes from May the 13th, Judy, and also June the 8th, if you please. Okay, I've got motion second. All in favor, signify by raising their hands. Ladies and gentlemen, before we dismiss you today, we're going to say, take care of yourselves, take care of your neighbor. We still have a pandemic going on. Just be careful. Fred, I want to thank you again for wearing the mask. The old folks and the young children were here today, and we didn't want to scare anybody, so great cooperation. With that said, God bless and take care.